a lot to talk about. A great week of college football last week, and I think we should get treated to the same this weekend. Some good games to boot, and I'm ready to talk about them, and I know you are too. So, Alex, take it away with that SEC spotlight.
It's just crazy. We're already sitting here in week 4 of college football. It's flown by just these short 3 weeks going into the 4th one, and I'm sure it'll continue to fly by as we go through the college football season. I'm also looking forward to college basketball when we can start covering those games and talking about what happened, what's going to happen. But let's cover week 4. We're going to do the same formula we had last week, starting with the SEC Spotlight, the games of the week there, the 3 big SEC matchups, go in depth, give more of our opinion, what to look for, the keys to each of those games. We'll go into the upset alerts each of us have for SEC teams, then go into the blitz picks, which is where we're going to go through the rest of the SEC schedule we did not cover in the games of the week. Then we have the On the Rise segment where we're going to talk about the SEC or players around the country that are on the rise showing improvement during the college football season. And then the players that have to prove it or coaches, that's on the hot seat segment. So we have a lot to go through in this first part of the show. And the rest of it's going to be great with the recruiting report as well as some tougher enough that KJ loves to talk about. Everybody is infatuated with. We'll go through that as well. But let's start out with the SEC Spotlight. The first game this week being number 22 Auburn taking on number 11 Oklahoma. KJ, this game was a sore spot for Auburn fans last year. This is the moment or the game where Peyton Thorne threw the pick 6 on 3rd and 4 with around 4 minutes left to go with Auburn up 21-16. Had all the momentum in that football game, and that pick 6 just drained the team, the stadium. You could just feel the energy leave it. And now they go to Oklahoma, having Oklahoma's old quarterback in Jackson Arnold. Tough task for them with the way Oklahoma's playing offense with John Mateer, as well as how stout their defense has been. But you can't ignore the way Auburn's run the football this year. Pretty weird for a Hugh Freeze offense having the reliability on just a couple running backs in Alston and Cobb. Alston obviously dealing with the injury, missing the last 2 games. Should be ready to go here. What do you look for in this game for both teams to be able to win?
Well, what I'm looking for is no more accumulated PTSD with Auburn, Oklahoma. You talked about last year. If I close my eyes hard enough, I can almost feel myself in the living room for last year's game, reaching for an apple to throw at the TV because I called Peyton Thorne apple turnover. But anyway, going on to this season, Auburn 3-0. We're ranked. First time it's happened in quite some time. This is the game that I've been saying for a few weeks, Alex. It actually concerns me more than Georgia at home. And I know people listening are going to, oh, what are you saying? Well, I'm not disrespecting Georgia. We'll get more to them later. But Oklahoma is a team that we didn't play well against last year. We got off to a good lead, let up, didn't run the football that well, relied too much last year on Peyton Thorne, made some terrible throws. This is a game this year that, as you mentioned, with the landscape kind of changing. Coach Freeze really relying on the running game so far this year. And I don't know that that's been completely by design. I think it's been more of just we've been taking what the defense has given us. And I think we're trying to slowly introduce Jackson Arnold into pushing the football down the field. Now, it does scare me that we've really not had a lot of downfield passing attack yet. Going against Oklahoma, you know they love loading the box, trying to take away your running game, coached by a very good defensive mind in Brent Venables, who I have a lot of respect for. Alex, this game is going to be tough for Auburn. It's tough for me to pick against my team. However, I think Oklahoma just has a little too much for us this early in the season. The concern for me more so is the defense. I mean, we have not tackled well at all, especially at the second and third levels. Oklahoma has a lot of athletes for John Mateer to get the football to. You mentioned that. I'm not looking forward to Saturday on the defensive side of the ball. I think this could potentially be a shootout. I don't know if we're going to get up and be able to move the ball as well, running the ball against the Sooners as we have against other teams, but I think we can be balanced enough to keep us in that game until the third or fourth quarter. I think it'll be a close one, but I do think the Sooners have the edge. As much as it pains me to say, the keys for Auburn to come on top has to be running the football, controlling the line of scrimmage, minimizing mistakes, and we got to make them make a mistake. When Auburn has gotten turnovers this year, they've scored off of them, be it a few inferior opponents and Baylor. That's something that we've got to do. We've got to try to turn them over. Can't keep letting that hostile crowd get more and more excited. We got to make them make a mistake and capitalize on it. That'll give us a chance to win.
Both these teams are quite different offensively. Auburn, as we've talked about, loves to run the football, has ran it down people's throats all year long. Then you have Oklahoma, who throws the rock around and really has struggled to run the football all year. John Mateer is the team's leading rusher, and you have a guy in Jaden Ott who has not turned it on at all this year, who I really expected to have a great year for Oklahoma after his career at California. Javante Barnes, who is also expected to have a great season, hasn't burst onto the scene either. It's been Torrey Blaylock at running back who's done the most work for them. It just hasn't the running game hasn't really worked out for Oklahoma. Also, you have to realize they're starting 2 freshman offensive linemen. And then another big loss for them is earlier this week, it was announced starting center and team captain Troy Everett is out for the season. And like I said, already starting 2 freshmen. That's a big issue for Oklahoma going forward, trying to run the football and also protect John Mateer, is losing that captain on the team as well as the offense to kind of direct protection alongside John Mateer. And going against an Auburn team that has a very stout defensive line with Kieron Crawford, Keldrick Falk, and a couple other guys there, I do think Oklahoma's offensive line is going to struggle in this football game. And if Auburn's able to get to John Mateer, I think that can turn Oklahoma's offense into a very bad situation. I also do worry about Jackson Arnold being able to throw the football down the field. I haven't seen a lot of it this year, and going into a hostile environment. I know he's played there before as the home team, being in Oklahoma last year. I just worry about him being able to be thrown to the fire, so to say, in a hostile environment, throwing the football against Oklahoma's defense, which is one of the best in the SEC. They're number 1 in passing defense, and then number 1 in only giving up 181 total yards per game. That's the first in the SEC. I just don't think Auburn has enough, or has proven to be enough on the offensive side of the football to be able to keep up with Oklahoma, who's going to really take away that running game and force Jackson Arnold to beat them with his arm. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that in this game, and John Mateer is going to be able to do that. If they take away his arm, they'll be able to lean on him in the running game. And I do think they have enough talent in the backfield to be able to help him out there. So I'll take Oklahoma just like you, KJ. Moving on to another spotlight game. Many people might not see it as that, but Tulane taking on number 13, Ole Miss. Tulane, they could be one of the dark horses to get that non-Power 4 bid to the college football playoff at the end of the year, having former BYU quarterback Jake Retzloff, after he had to come on as a walk-on to the program. That was a whole issue with him and what happened at BYU. Don't have enough time to get into that and what transpired there. But Ole Miss did struggle defensively last week against Taylon Green, using his legs and throwing the football around the field. Came down to a key turnover on Ole Miss's side of the football field with Arkansas driving down, fumble by the receiver Jaylen Brown that helped Ole Miss win that football game. And you also had quarterback Austin Simmons for the Rebels down with an ankle injury. He did play sparingly due to some issues with Trinidad Chambliss, helmet coming off and whatnot. But Trinidad Chambliss, in my opinion, looked the best quarterback has looked for Ole Miss all season. Who do you have winning this football game between an American, Tulane, and then Ole Miss?
Listen, I think Tulane is one of those teams that just love giving people upset bids. You mentioned how well they played against Kentucky earlier this year, and for all intents and purposes, up until a minute or so to go in that game, Tulane was in it. Tulane absolutely can control the line of scrimmage against inferior opponents. I think they can rush the passer. If they're able to put pressure on Austin Simmons, if Austin Simmons is healthy and gets to start, Austin Simmons has shown the ability of putting the ball to the other team as much as he's shown the ability of getting the ball to his own team. As many touchdowns and interceptions on the year for him. Taylon Green very good game against the Rebels last week, running the football. I think if Tulane does enough with their offense, they can stay in the game. However, I just don't know that they can stop Ole Miss's total dynamic package. Ole Miss is really kind of, I guess you could say, playing with fire. 2 weeks in a row, they've came kind of close to being knocked off. And I don't know. I think Ole Miss finds a way to get this game back in the win column for them. I think Austin Simmons, if he does get the start, should bounce back. But, man, you cannot count out Tulane in this game. As we said with several games last week with our upset picks, we'll get to those later. But, these non-power 5 teams like Tulane, like, Cincinnati of a few years ago, you can't count them out anymore. With NIL, there's a lot more level in playing field, and I don't know. I just think Tulane can make this interesting, but I like Ole Miss in the game.
Tulane will make it interesting just due to the fact their quarterback is so talented. He's very similar to Taylon Green in the aspect where he can run the football, is that dual threat. Now, is he the same athlete that Taylon Green is? No. But he offers that dual threat ability to where if that pocket breaks down or if Tulane, John Summerall, wants to run the read option or a quarterback draw, he has the ability to make keep the Ole Miss defense honest, which is huge going against that Rebel defense. Last week we saw it get diced up with Taylon Green running the show, but you cannot get into a shootout. We saw it last week with Arkansas. They got into a shootout with Ole Miss, and then that one key mistake at the end of the football game cost them. And Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin feeds off the shootouts. He has the offense to keep up with that. And I just don't think Tulane has that offense to be able to keep up and score the 40, 50 points you might have to score to beat Ole Miss. I just don't see enough weapons offensively outside of Retzloff at quarterback to be able to put up those 40 and 50 points that Ole Miss might put up. So I'll take Ole Miss here. But like you said, KJ, if they're able to keep that Ole Miss offense at bay, whether it's Austin Simmons at quarterback or Trinidad Chambliss, and they're able to put up those 30, 40 points and hold Ole Miss to 20, 30, obviously they're going to be able to win the football game. But if it gets to a shootout, which I would expect it to be the way Tulane has played defense these past couple of weeks, which is where they played great against Darian Mensah at times against Duke last week, but they just haven't played the same style of defense they need to be able to play against an Ole Miss offense is going to sling the rock around the field and use Kejuan Lacey to just run it down your throat.
Yeah, I've really grown to be fond of Kejuan Lacey. He's come on as one of the more dynamic backs in the league this year, no doubt. I think just him being in the backfield for the Rebels, you got to give the Rebels the edge in this game, but I do think it'll be close.
I think Kejuan Lacey is really gone under the radar for a lot of people. Everybody's talking about Ahmad Hardy after last week's performance against a subpar opponent. But Kejuan Lacey's up there with him in rushing yards in the SEC, and I do expect him to have a very good year after nobody really talked about him in preseason. It was all Logan Diggs at running back, and Kejuan Lacey has come onto the scene and impressed a lot of people. Next and final game for our SEC Spotlight, South Carolina taking on number 23 Missouri. The Gamecocks looked awful last week. Granted, Lenora Sellers went down with a concussion early in that football game, ended up losing 31-7 to Vanderbilt, which was one of our upset picks from last week. I believe it was yours, KJ. I had picked Ole Miss and Arkansas. I picked Arkansas. We talked about how that went, but it was a rough showing for the South Carolina offense, as it has been all season, out even with Lenora Sellers at quarterback. And Missouri, Ahmad Hardy, great game last week for them. Who do you think is going to win this football game?
I don't know that it necessarily matters who gets the snap at quarterback. If Lenoris can get back into the game, of course he gives South Carolina a better chance. And no disrespect at all to Luke Doty, but, you just look at what happened last week for South Carolina, and it just kind of, for lack of better words, it just kind of felt like some of their aspirations, for now at least, were a little humbled. You talk about that great preseason ranking, Lenora Sellers, even in the week 1 win versus Virginia Tech, or week 0, however you want to call it. Even in that game, had a very slow start throwing the football. Didn't really get in good rhythm until the second half. And now they're playing a team in Missouri who is another sneaky, tough game on the Auburn Tigers schedule that's kind of got me losing sleep in the back of my mind. Listen, Ahmad Hardy is as dynamic as they come. I know he had not a great defense to run against last week, I'll put it kindly. But Ahmad Hardy can play. He has the X factor. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can turn it upfield between the tackles. I really like what they can give overall behind him as well. They have good depth. They have good receiving production at Missouri, backing up Luther Burden, going to the Bears. I like this Missouri team this year, and I think they take care of business against South Carolina. I don't really know if it matters who gets the snap at quarterback, the first snap, but I think Missouri being at home is just too much.
It's really felt like that Mike Shula and Lenora Sellers have really been asleep at the wheel offensively. It's been lackadaisical at times. They're 30% on third down, which is one of the worst in the country. As an SEC school with the talent you have, or what I was told you would have by South Carolina fans through our social media reels when I made the comment they were going to be one of the busts in this conference this season, and it looks like they are going to be the way they play offense. Rasul Faison, the running back they got from Utah State, who was an 1,000-yard rusher last year. I know he was kind of struggling with some eligibility issues and didn't get really into practice until later in the offseason. But through 3 games, 27 carries, 135 yards and a touchdown. His backup, Oscar Attaway, 22 carries, 86 yards and a touchdown. Not a lot of production there on top of Lenora Sellers, who also is kind of struggling in the rushing department. And then receiving weapons. Nick Harbor, we know he's going to be an uber-talented receiver, a freak athlete, 6'4", 6'5", runs a great 40 time. I believe it was a 4.2 or 4.3 40. And 7 receptions, 165 yards and a touchdown. And outside of him, they don't have a 100-yard receiver thus far. The next closest guy is Donovan Murph with 5 receptions, 94 yards. The offense just hasn't looked great all year. Been bailed up by special teams and Vakari Swain, who's had 3 punt returns thus far in the first. He had those in the first 2 games of the season. I just am not in love with the offense. The defense, we know what they have there with Dylan Stewart off the edge, but they're also giving up 300 yards per game, which is 5th worst in the SEC. I don't think they have enough to stop Missouri, who, I'll be honest, it was not on my radar to start the season, but the way they're playing with Bo Perula at quarterback, who looks a lot better than Drew Aller does at Penn State, and the 2 running backs they have in Ahmad Hardy, who, as we've talked about, came onto the scene last week with 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as his backup, Jamal Roberts, who has breakaway speed and is a breezer. Those 2 guys alongside Perula, and then you have the receiving weapons, Kevin Coleman Jr., Marquise Johnson, Brett Norfleet, who's a red zone matchup nightmare. This team just has so much offensively, and the defensively has also gone under the radar, in my opinion. Not a lot of people talking about that defense, but led by West Virginia transfer Josiah Trotter, who's a son of Jeremiah Trotter, if you know the NFL, super talented guy back in the day. And then you also have Jalen Catalon, who's been around the world and back in the SEC and at UNLV as well, and Damon Wilson, the Georgia transfer, leading the team with 3 sacks. The defense has looked outstanding, and I do expect Missouri to win this game, and I would not be surprised if we're sitting here at the end of the year that Missouri is in the college football playoff by the way they performed in the early parts of the season.
Yeah, you talk about 62% on third down. I mean, that is smoking. When you can convert at 62%, it just gives your team all the chances to be in the game in the fourth quarter.
Those are our 3 big-time games this week, KJ. Let's talk about the teams on upset alert this week. Who do you have on your upset alert in the SEC this weekend?
Oh man, there's some that you could go either way. But listen, for my upset alert, I'm gonna have to go. I'm kind of torn, Alex. I don't know. I really don't. You want to give yours first?
I can give mine. I'm going to go with Arkansas Razorbacks. They're going to be the upset alert this weekend. They're playing the Memphis Tigers. ESPN Analytics gives Arkansas a 59.7% chance to win this game as of Tuesday. They're 2-1 to start the season. Obviously, like I talked about, a rough loss to Ole Miss last week with that fumble. I do think it took a lot out of their sails, but the good thing is Sam Pittman talked about is they weren't down in the dumps. They were trying to figure out how to regroup and get back on the winning side of the football game this weekend, playing Memphis. Arkansas, we know what their offense is going to be like. One of the best in the SEC and really one of the best in the country, but Taylon Green at quarterback has shown a lot of improvement this season with Bobby Petrino as his OC, the second season for both those guys at Arkansas. And I'm going to be honest with you, Taylon Green could have that Jaden Daniels type Heisman year where his team might not be in the college football playoff, might not be 10-2, 11-1. But if he continues to play the way he's playing, I don't think can ignore him at the Heisman ceremony, because he's been putting his team on his back offensively and really willed this team to a couple victories and willed this team against Ole Miss until the very end when his receiver made a crucial mistake. And Memphis, they're another team like Tulane that could be a sneaky dark horse into that that at-large spot for the non-Power 4 teams. They've played Chattanooga, Georgia State, and Troy. Not too many great opponents. They're sitting at 3-0, but they felt like they've been on that cusp of making the college football playoff the past couple of years under Ryan Silverfield. And this could be the year where they pull off this upset against Arkansas. You have some great talent in Brendan Lewis at quarterback, transferring over from Nevada. He hasn't looked great, only 2 touchdowns to 1 interception through those 3 games. The running game with Sutton Smith, 247 yards and 4 touchdowns, leaned on him a lot. I do think Memphis has enough talent, but this weekend I don't see a lot of upsets in the SEC. I still think Arkansas ends up pulling this out, but Memphis is going to make them work for it. So I'll still say Arkansas wins, but there really wasn't a lot of teams to me that were on upset alert this weekend.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my thing. I've been going back and forth with a few that I think could be. And I don't know that they're going to win the game, but I'll give an upset alert for a team that I think a lot of people are writing off because of how bad the performance was and how awful the schedule is ahead. But I'm just going to say it. I do think that the Florida Gators have a chance to go to Miami.
1%.
Yeah, a 1% by metrics, but. Again, you're playing at their house. I know it's going to be tough, and I do think the Hurricanes probably have the advantage for good reason, but just because there wasn't a whole lot of intriguing stuff, and we've already talked about Tulane possibly getting the job done. I'm going to say that the Gators at least come out and play inspired football on the road for Billy Napier. You saw that against LSU. You called that. You and I both neither thought would be a huge blowout. They did play hard for Coach Napier. I think DJ Lagway, a lot of times people could question that as he kind
he might be playing for Brian Kelly at the end of the year.
Yeah, he might be friends with Peyton Thorne too. He had a really bad game, but one game doesn't define a player. I'm a believer in that. I'm not saying DJ Lagway is going to go out and throw for 500, but just don't be surprised if you see Florida with a little more mojo, especially on defense. Rushing the passer, you'll probably see him get after it a little more. I don't know. Florida and Miami is a rivalry game. I think there will be a little bit of pride for the Gators in that, and I think you could see a hard-fought game, at least for 2.5, 3 quarters. Sorry for the lack of upsets for the week, but there's really not many.
It really is hard. Outside of Tulane and Ole Miss, Arkansas and Memphis, and maybe Florida and Miami, it's kind of a tune-up week for the rest of the SEC. Outside of the big 3 games we covered.
Yeah, Auburn and Oklahoma, you can't really call that an upset for either team.
Yeah, it's kind of just an even battle there. I know the rankings differ, but those teams are pretty even in the talent they have on both sides of the football. Let's talk about our Blitz picks this week, KJ. Go through the rest of the SEC schedule. First one being UAB, my alma mater, the Blazers, taking on number 15 Tennessee. Trent Dilfer going back to his old stomping grounds where he's the high school football coach there for a few years. KJ, is there any time we need to waste here on this one with Tennessee? UAB, they have some offense, but their defense might as well not even show up.
Yeah, their defense, they're better off asking the Water Boys if they'd like to try out and take a few snaps to spell the relief of embarrassment, disperse it evenly. But the UAB has no chance to come into Neyland Stadium. I would say normally if Tennessee hadn't just lost to Georgia the way they would, you could probably see a few touchdowns, something to that nature. But Tennessee just lost to Georgia. They're really upset right now. I don't think UAB is going to have a chance at this game. I'm going with the Volunteers.
Yeah, as a Bama fan, I just thank God that Georgia won that football game because I did not want to play an angry Georgia that lost the way they did to Tennessee if that happened.
Yeah, that's fair.
The next one, Arkansas-Memphis, I talked about that being an upset alert pick. Still had Arkansas winning it, but Memphis has a lot of talent. They're on that cusp. It feels like every season. KJ, do you have them pulling off the upset here?
I like Arkansas in the game, but I do agree with your assessment of Memphis. I think Memphis is a very good football team, and we failed to mention Memphis with a hometown product in Kamor Harris, close to where we're actually recording this, was his stomping grounds in high school, playing defensive end for Memphis, and one of many athletes with great size on that defense. They're much improved on that side of the ball. They've always had running backs. You go back to Daryl Henderson from Memphis. How good was he in his college days?
Pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely a monster. I do think Memphis can move the football enough. I just like Arkansas. I think they have a little too many playmakers for Memphis, but I think that should be a very good game this week.
A game last year that we might have picked a little bit differently, KJ. Northern Illinois taking on Mississippi State. Yeah. Northern Illinois put off the upset against Notre Dame last season. Not the same team this year, with some NIL and the players leaving to pursue those opportunities, and Mississippi State benefiting from players leaving those lower tier programs to come to the school and transfer from the program. They're coming off a win over Arizona State a couple weeks ago. Pretty big upset for them and program building win that we talked about last week. Do you think Northern Illinois has another upset in them this year?
I don't think it's going to happen, not in Bulldog country. Listen, Mississippi State may have one of the more underrated wins of the year against Arizona State. I don't think people are talking about it enough. I know Mississippi State, in terms of landscape of the SEC, still may not stack up with some other teams, but the fact is this: they're faster on defense, they're well coached, they're angry, they're tired of Mississippi State being laughed at with the football team. Not really characteristic for them. Mississippi State absolutely should be getting a little more credit. I could see them sitting at the end of the year with 7 to 8 wins, and I think Saturday will be one of them.
A lot of people had Mississippi State kind of marked off on a lot of their SEC schedules as, oh, that's a win, similar to what Kentucky is right now, is that's a shoe-in win. And the way they played against Arizona State and the way they've looked all year, you just got to mark off that. It's not a shoe-in win anymore. They're going to come in and they're going to compete. I don't think Northern Illinois has enough. I'm taking the Bulldogs as well. Next one, KJ, you talked about it in your upset alert pick, Florida taking on number 4 Miami. Do you think Miami's just going to win this football game, or do you have Florida pulling off the upset?
I think Miami wins. I know that I picked them my upset game, but I think this could be a game that Miami needs to be alert for the Gators on. You just mentioned a shoe-in with, speaking of Mississippi State, you can't consider Florida's offense bad just by that one game. I know it's been bad a few games. People who don't like Florida, just hear me out. DJ Lagway is still a young quarterback, and I'm going to be honest with you. The offensive line for Florida against South Florida was absolutely abysmal. I mean, they were getting manhandled with 3-man rushes. When you give up sacks to a 3-man rush, and you have 5 offensive linemen, somebody's missing a block, Mr. Baumann. Somebody's missing a block. And I don't think it's fair to just say DJ Lagway is bad. He has definitely got some improvement to do, and I think they've got to start making it more simple for him, getting the ball to the running back side of the backfield, probably a good safe call to get some yardage. And I think enough of that and enough of Florida capitalizing in the red zone, being aggressive on defense, not sitting back in zone against Carson Beck, but blitzing Carson Beck, making him make decisions. He has shown the one flaw in his game over his collegiate career is when you make him throw on the tight windows under pressure, sometimes he floats one the other way. And I think if they do that and they can get 1 or 2 of those, it could be a close game, but I still like Miami's offense. I like Miami with all of that they've added in the transfer portal, especially on defense. I think they have enough to win the game, but don't sleep on Florida.
Well, if Florida can't block against USF's 3-man rush, good luck blocking Ruben Bain Jr. and Akeem Mesidor off the edge for Miami. They're just going to eat Florida's offensive line for lunch. And then Carson Beck, I've been an avid Carson Beck hater since his time at Georgia, not only because he was a Georgia player, but just how poorly he played last season. But I can't ignore the way he started this season, playing against Notre Dame and a couple subpar opponents. I think Carson Beck and the offense, and then as well as the Miami defense, are just too much for Florida to keep up in this game. And Billy Napier's seat's only going to get hotter and hotter as we go further into the season.
Yep.
It might get too hot for him to sit on, and you might have to go somewhere else. Another game that was an upset last year, Georgia State actually did beat Vanderbilt, but this year they're back playing Vanderbilt again at Vanderbilt's home stadium, Georgia State and Vanderbilt. KJ, do you have Georgia State pulling off the upset again?
I'm going to say something, and I don't know if this is possible, but I wonder if Vanderbilt's defense, what they're going to do the night before, because I don't think they're going to be losing any sleep over the guy taking snaps.
I knew where you were going with this.
And I'm just going to say it, TJ Finley, former Auburn quarterback, has played for almost as many teams as he has fingers, though. I mean, if we're being honest, he loves that transfer portal.
LSU, Auburn, Texas State, Western Kentucky, Tulane, Georgia State. That's 6 teams, KJ.
Well, that's a hand and a finger of another hand. TJ Finley and Georgia State have no chance to come into Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, I've said it before last week, I don't think you can sleep on Diego Pavia. You can be mad that he got the extra year, or you can go out and play defense against him and Eli Stowers. And Vanderbilt has just made people eat their words about them with those two back in the saddle again. They're a two-man wrecking crew, and on defense, you can't ignore what they've done at times. Some point totals, not great, but they are very good at stopping the short runs. I like Vanderbilt in this game. I think they're all over Georgia State. TJ Finley will get a rude welcome back to the SEC.
I know they have a lot of similar players that they had last season when they lost to Georgia State. Diego Pavia was at quarterback. Eli Stowers was at tight end. But it's not the same Vanderbilt team in the sense where the mentality is different and everything around the program, the expectations are different. So I don't think this game is going to be even remotely close. It's not going to be a 36-32 game like it was last year. Vanderbilt's going to blow the doors off of them. They're back, they're ready, and they're hungry to compete in the SEC. 2 more games here, KJ. Should be really some shoe-in wins for both these programs. Southeastern Louisiana takes on number 3 LSU, and Sam Houston State taking on number 8 Texas. Or are we going to take the 2 SEC teams there? I don't think there's really any further discussion to be had.
I'd take the 2 SEC teams if they trotted out the 3rd-string coaches and 5th-string water boys.
Well, that wraps up the Blitz picks. Moving on to the In the Hot Seat segment as well as the On the Rise segment. The In the Hot Seat, like I talked about at the beginning of the show, is every week we're going to talk about which player, team, and or coach has the most to prove going into the weekend. KJ, who is your coach, player, team on the hot seat this weekend?
Well, I've got players, and I started to take DJ Lagway at Florida after the 5 interceptions. I think that would have been a popular selection, but I'm gonna turn to a different direction of a guy taking snaps at quarterback for a team that I was extremely high on, and I've been wrong before, Alex, especially in this line of work, and I'm not afraid to get on this microphone and say I was wrong, and I was 100% wrong about Cade Klubnik and Clemson. And
one of many.
And I don't know if he was listening to me and just decided that I jinxed him. I don't know what the case is, but it looks like a different Cade Klubnik. I mean, he's forcing passes, as many touchdowns and interceptions, not even at 60% throwing the football right now. The team just lost to Georgia Tech on a game-winning field goal. Georgia Tech on a game-winning field goal. The offense didn't even get out of the 20s against Georgia Tech. The same offense that at one point was losing to, who was it? Troy.
Till the third quarter.
Yeah, until the third quarter. I'm sorry, but my hot seat has got to be Cade Klubnik. Man, I'm still going to say that you can turn it around and have a decent rest of your year, but I don't know what's going on with Cade right now. I think he's got his mind on his girl or his major or something else, but it's not been on football. At least he hasn't played that way, and Clemson is struggling because of it. And I think he and Clemson are on the hot seat right now.
Clemson's one of those teams, being in the ACC, where you can't afford to be 10-2 or 9-3 at the end of the year, because you don't have those marquee wins. Where if you're in the SEC and you're 10-2 and 9-3. You know you have a couple of ranked wins against maybe a top 10, at least a top 15 opponent. And Clemson's not going to be able to get that going into their schedule looking forward. Cade Klubnik's definitely on the hot seat. Dabo, he's addressed some questions this week about him being on the hot seat. I don't know what direction their program's going in, but we had the same talk, or people had the same discussion last year when Clemson started off so poorly, and they rattled off all these wins and into the season in the college football playoff. So I'm not going to count Cape Klubnik and Dabo Swinney and Clemson out just yet, but you've got to make up a lot of ground being 1-2, losing two games you needed to win, being LSU and Georgia Tech early in the season. My player on the hot seat this week is going to be Arch Manning. Again, I did last week. I took low-hanging fruit. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit this week. He just hasn't looked good at all. Everybody, no. Paul Feinbaum, all these talking heads around the SEC and around the country have this guy as the Heisman. He was a shoo-in Heisman winner. He hasn't even looked a capable starting quarterback, much less a Heisman candidate. Texas has the fourth worst passing offense in the SEC, only 200 yards per game, and a Steve Sarkisian offense that's bad. That's pretty bad. They have the third worst scoring offense in the SEC in front of LSU and South Carolina with 24 points per game. Those are two teams you don't want to be associated with scoring offense. LSU, they've had their offensive woes all year long. We talked about South Carolina and their issues getting the ball in the end zone earlier in the show. The offense led by Arch Manning. People are probably praying that Quinn Ewers returned for another season if you're a Texas fan. But Arch Manning, the mechanics are off. He holds the ball too long. He has some wobbly throws. They're off target. He's missing wide open receivers in the end zone. I've seen all these clips on social media and all these guys that break down film of the amount of times where he leaves the pocket unnecessarily, where he's missing wide open receivers streaking down the football field. And I don't want to Monday morning quarterback him, but when you have all this hype going into the season, when you're coached by Steve Sarkisian and you're missing layups and your mechanics look bad, you're missing the easy stuff as a quarterback. You can't be missing the easy stuff. I'd understand if he was missing the tight window throws or some of the rhythm throws in the early part of the season, but he's missing the layups and the easy stuff that you should know as a freshman quarterback. He's in year 3 of Steve Sarkisian's offense. This thing should be firing on all cylinders. He should be hitting the weapons. And it's also not like he doesn't have any weapons as running backs. We talked about it when we previewed Texas going into the season. Wisner, Jarrett Gibson, C.J. Baxter, super talented trio. Receiving weapons, Parker Livingstone, who's come onto the season, Jack Injuries, tight end, Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore Jr., Khalil Lockett. It's not like he doesn't have weapons. His offensive line has played, I think, better than a lot of people expected, having to replace 4 or 5 starters. It's just Arch Manning has looked awful. And he's got to turn it around if Texas is going to be able to compete in the SEC where you have teams up and down the field. I would argue the only team that's not going to be able to contend this season in the SEC is Kentucky. You could see Mississippi State contending the way they played Arizona State. I would not be surprised if we're sitting here and Mississippi State's 9-3, even though their schedule's daunting. They have proven they can go and beat opponents that are supposedly supposed to beat them. They can go in as the underdog and handle business.
You could say Vandy.
Even Vandy.
Arkansas.
Honestly, maybe South Carolina's in the Kentucky boat right now, the way they're playing football, where it may be they're not going to make the college football playoff, but I'm not counting them out either. They have too much talent with Lenora Sellers and Nick Harper and Dylan Stewart for me to count them out. It's just Arch Manning. He's got to get better if Texas is going to contend in the SEC. And if you're calling for his job, who are you going to put in there? Who are you going to put in there that's going to be better than Arch Manning? Even though he's bad, he's still got talent. He has talent. He has been coached by his uncles, some of the best quarterbacks of all time. I think he has it in him. He's just got to get his confidence back. That's the biggest thing right now is I don't doubt he's looking at social media. He's hearing all these rumblings of how bad he's playing, and he's going into that. He's got to turn off his phone, delete social media, and just focus on football and winning football games. And I'm sure that's what Steve Sarkisian is telling him right now is focus on football. Don't focus on what all the Jimmies and Joes are talking about on anything. Just do you.
Yeah, no doubt. You said it great right there. And I think also we go back to coach making games simpler for struggling quarterback. I think anytime you have a guy that's really talented, struggling, get him in rhythm, get him some easy completions. You mentioned the backs. They're all pretty sure-handed out of the backfield, screens, wheel routes, sideline routes. Get this guy some easy completions. That's my one criticism with Arch Manning, outside of Arch Manning's control, is that at times I think Sark has tried to roll the dice too much with him to try to get that confidence up, and sometimes pushing the ball on 30-yard go routes out of RPOs is not going to help a struggling quarterback.
This weekend has got to be the time where Arch Manning figures it out. Playing Sam Houston State should blow the doors off them. And after this weekend, you're at Florida, you host Oklahoma, you're at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, host Vandy, at Georgia, host Arkansas, and host Texas A&M. None of those games are going to be easy, like we talked about. Maybe Kentucky, but they've even put up a fight against Ole Miss earlier in the season. He's got to figure the offense out. You can't go into these games with Art struggling and playing the offense as poorly as you've played it. He's on the hot seat this week. He's got to be better and prove it to the country and to the coaching staff. He's the guy. Last segment before we take a timeout, KJ, the On the Rise segment. Each week we're going to pick a player, coach, or team that has shown improvement or come on the scene. Who's going to be your player or coach or team on the rise this week?
For me, I'm going to stick with the theme of last week, taking an Auburn Tiger who I think has been excellent. Last week, I took Kerryon Crawford on defense with a great year so far to help out Keldrick Falk. But this time, I'm going to go offense. And this year, there's been a running back for Auburn that wasn't the normal starter, but because of an injury to Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb has been absolutely outstanding. He's got a long rush of 46. He's ran it to the house 4 times, a whopping 6.8 yards per carry.
Jeez.
I know 2 of those teams, not very good, but still, when you can average 6.8 yards a carry, and it's what I said about Ashton Jeanty winning the Heisman last year, not to get too off topic, but that guy at what point averaged 9 yards a carry. I don't care who you're playing. That's legitimate. And Jeremiah Cobb so far has looked really good, in particular on speed rushes, wide sets, getting him some toss sweeps. But they've even started letting him run it between the tackles, which not really his forte. But last week and against Baylor, you saw him really go between guard and tackle and get 5 yards, which is normally the Damari Alston scenario. And he's been up for the task this year. And I think when Alston is completely back healthy and we start rotating Omar Mabson in the game a little more, I thought he's looked good at times. I think the Tigers could have a pretty nice 3-back punch with Darrell Robinson as well, but he may miss some time with an injury. But Jeremiah Cobb has been outstanding for Auburn, and I hope he has a great game Saturday against Oklahoma.
I'm going to do the same thing, follow suit like I did last week, talking about some Alabama players. I'd be stupid not to talk about this guy this week, Ty Simpson, the quarterback. After the Florida State game, everybody's asking, where's Keelan? Where's Austin Mack? This guy doesn't have it. He's too jittery in the pocket. Time to move on after one game. I was not one of those guys. I knew the potential he had. He was one of the handful of guys against Florida State that actually looked like he gave a crap in that football game. And I know he didn't look splendid at times. But since then, the response by Ty Simpson, as well as the entire football team, has been nothing short of awesome. Against Louisiana Monroe, I get it. They're not a great football team. 17-17 in the first half. It's a record, a school record for consecutive completions to start a game. And the first time an SEC quarterback finished a game with 17 completions and no incompletions or interceptions. He finished the game with He finished the half with 226 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. And then against Wisconsin, 24-29, 382 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions.
Yeah, that last one's the key. When you can do that at over 60 and no interceptions.
Since Florida State, he's 41-46, 608 yards, 7 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And the big thing that everybody's circling and talking about is Alabama has had no turnovers through the first 3 games. Even against Florida State, didn't have any turnovers. Ty Simpson has held the ball. He hasn't turned it over, and that was the big thing for Alabama last year, was Jalen Milroe threw too many interceptions and cost Alabama too many football games with those interceptions. You can go back to the Tennessee game where we're on the final drive, we need to get some points, throws an interception. The Oklahoma game, throws 2 interceptions. The Vanderbilt game starts off the game with 2 turnovers. Granted, one of them wasn't his fault. The receiver went through the receiver's hands. But Ty Simpson's taking care of the football, and that's one of the biggest things that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer talked about going into the season for the quarterback, is they want them to take care of the football. And he has done that through the first 3 games. He's shown improvement. Granted, it's against not great opponents, Louisiana Monroe and even Wisconsin's not that great of a football team, but they are one of the better defenses in the country, statistically wise. it's just the offenses look so much better. The play of Ty Simpson as well as everybody around him has improved so much, and I expect this team to be a lot better going into SEC play. And I cannot believe that I look at all these Heisman lists and Ty Simpson's not even listed on them. It's baffling to me that nobody's giving him any love in the Heisman race.
He should at least be at the bottom of the race. He has to be mentioned. He may not be 1 or 2, but you've got to put him at least at 3 through 5.
Yeah,
based on what we've seen so far. The other thing for Alabama, to make a very quick point as well, is that for both Milroe and Ty Simpson, they were the most penalized offense because of false starts, because of miscellaneous things. Last week, you guys won the penalty bug, and if you keep winning the penalty bug, it can do nothing but help the quarterback.
Yeah,